What if a single moment of cruelty could completely change lives forever? Picture this, an elegant restaurant on a busy Tuesday evening, where Claire Martinez carefully adjusts her apron before approaching table 12. She's been working double shifts for months, saving every penny while caring for her elderly father. Tonight, she carries herself a little differently because tucked under her arm is something special, a beautiful designer handbag she'd found at an estate sale. Pristine and perfect, but the man sitting at table 12 doesn't see a hard-working daughter or a dedicated server. James Thornfield, worth more than most people's wildest dreams, sees only what he wants to see. And when his eyes land on that handbag, something cruel and judgmental stirs in his chest. He's about to make an assumption that will shatter more than just Claire's evening. It will crack open his own carefully constructed world. Where are you watching from tonight? Let's see what happens next. Claire had been working at Meadowbrook Fine Dining for 3 years, long enough to recognize the type of customer now seated in her section. James Thornfield didn't just wear expensive clothes, he wore them like armor. His watch cost more than most people's cars, and everything about his posture screamed that he expected the world to bend to his will. She approached his table with practiced grace, the kind that comes from years of treating every customer with dignity, regardless of how they treated her. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Meadowbrook. May I start you with something to drink? James barely looked up from his phone. Scotch, the expensive kind, and I'm expecting someone, so don't hover. Of course. Claire maintained her warm smile then as she felt the familiar sting of dismissal. She'd grown used to it, though it never stopped hurting completely. As she moved toward the bar, Claire caught her reflection in the restaurant's mirrors. The handbag really was beautiful. Deep navy leather with gold hardware, the kind of timeless piece that would last forever. She'd found it at Mrs. Peterson's estate sale 3 days ago, along with a box of her father's medications that she could finally afford. The elderly woman running the sale had insisted it was authentic, even showing her the original receipt tucked inside, that belonged to someone very special. Mrs. Peterson had said with sad eyes. She'd wanted to go to someone who'd appreciate its value. Claire certainly did. It made her feel confident and professional, like she belonged in the same world as the people she served, even if just for one evening. When she returned with James's scotch, she noticed him studying her with an unpleasant intensity. His companion still hadn't arrived, and he seemed restless. The kind of restless that often meant trouble for wait staff. That's an interesting bag you've got there, James said suddenly, his voice carrying an edge that made Claire's stomach tighten. Thank you, sir. She kept her response polite and brief. Where'd you get it? Let me guess. One of those knockoff places downtown. His tone was casual, but there was something cruel underneath. Come on, you can tell me. We both know a server's salary doesn't stretch to genuine designer pieces. Heat flooded Claire's cheeks. Around them, other diners continued their conversations, but she felt exposed, like a spotlight had suddenly found her in the dark. It was a gift. Sir. James leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at his lips. A gift, right. Look, I'm not judging you for buying fake goods. Everyone does it, but don't insult my intelligence by pretending that's authentic. I know quality when I see it. And that ... He gestured dismissively at her bag. That's not it. The restaurant seemed to grow quieter around them, though Claire knew it was just her perception. Other staff members had started to notice the tension, their concerned glances making her feel even more self-conscious. I understand your concern, sir, Claire managed, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Is there anything else I can get for you this evening? But James wasn't finished. He was just getting started, and something in his expression suggested he was about to cross a line that would change everything for both of them. You know what bothers me about people like you, James continued, his voice growing louder, drawing attention from nearby tables. You work in a place like this, serving people who've actually earned their success, and you think you can fake your way into looking like you belong. Claire felt her hands tremble slightly as she gripped her order pad. 3 years of serving demanding customers had taught her patience, but this was different. This wasn't about slow service or a wrong order. This was personal. Sir, I really think that bag is insulting to people who can actually afford the real thing. James's voice carried across the restaurant now, and conversations at other tables had quieted. My wife has the same model, and I know for a fact it costs more than you make in 6 months. The words hit Claire like physical blows. She thought about her father at home, waiting for her to bring dinner, about the second job she'd started cleaning offices at dawn, about the estate sale where she'd carefully counted out bills, making sure she had enough left for groceries. With respect, "Sir," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you don't know anything about my situation." James laughed, a harsh sound that made several diners turn to stare. "I know enough. I've built businesses, employed thousands of people. I understand economics, and the economics say you're carrying a fake." That's when something shifted inside Claire. She thought about Mrs. Peterson's kind eyes, about the receipts still tucked in the bag's inner pocket, about every small humiliation she'd endured while working to build a better life. She thought about her father, who taught her that dignity wasn't something others could take away unless you let them. "You want to talk economics?" Claire asked, and this time her voice carried clearly. She reached into the handbag with steady hands, pulling out a small white envelope. "Let's talk economics." She unfolded the receipt with deliberate care. The paper was slightly yellowed but perfectly legible, a purchase receipt from Bergman's department store, dated 2 months ago. The bag's model number, description, and price were all clearly listed, $2,847. This bag was purchased for $2,847 on September 15th, Claire said, her voice growing stronger, "from Bergman's flagship store on 5th Avenue. Would you like to examine the receipt more closely?" James's expression began to change, confusion replacing arrogance. He leaned forward, studying the paper Claire held out. "The purchaser's name is listed right here," Claire continued, pointing to the bottom of the receipt. "Helen R. Thornfield, credit card ending in 4738. The color drained from James's face so quickly that Claire almost felt sorry for him. "Almost. That's my wife's maiden name," he whispered, his voice completely different now. "And our card number." The restaurant had gone completely silent around them. Even the kitchen noise seemed muted as James stared at the receipt in Claire's steady hands. "If this moment has touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Sometimes the truth has a way of finding us when we least expect it." "I believe," Claire said quietly, "we need to have a different conversation now. Because either your wife lost this bag, or there's something else you need to know." James sat frozen, staring at the receipt as if it might transform into something else if he looked long enough. The numbers didn't lie, the date, the amount, his wife's full name, their credit card number. This wasn't just any bag. This was Helen's bag, the one she'd been frantically searching for over the past few weeks. "I don't understand," he said, and for the first time since Claire had approached his table, he sounded like a human being instead of a weapon. "Helen's been looking everywhere for this bag. She was devastated when she lost it. We even called the police to file a report." Claire felt the shift in the room's energy. The other diners had returned to their conversations, but she could sense the manager approaching from across the restaurant. She needed to handle this carefully. Her job might depend on it. "Sir, maybe we should discuss this more privately," she suggested gently. James nodded, seeming smaller somehow. Yes, that would be better." He looked around at the curious faces and flushed. "I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry. This doesn't make sense." Claire guided him to a quiet corner near the windows, away from the other guests. As they walked, she found herself studying this man who'd seemed so confident just minutes ago. Now he looked lost, confused, almost fragile. "Can you tell me where you got this?" James asked, his voice barely audible. "An estate sale on Maple Street. Mrs. Peterson was selling her daughter's belongings." Claire paused, watching James's face carefully. The woman running the sale said it had belonged to someone special, someone who'd passed away recently. Something flickered across James's features. Recognition, then something deeper and more painful. "What was her daughter's name?" I never asked. Mrs. Peterson just said she was young, that she died unexpectedly. Claire felt her heart beginning to race. Why? Do you think you might have known her? James was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Helen volunteered at a hospice center downtown. She befriended a young woman there, someone about your age. Helen would visit her every week, bring her books, sometimes little gifts. The pieces began falling into place, and Claire felt tears prick at her eyes. The woman's name was Catherine Peterson. James continued. She died 6 weeks ago. Helen was devastated. She'd grown so close to her, almost like a daughter. After the funeral, Helen said she wanted to do something special to honor Catherine's memory, but she couldn't figure out what. Claire's hands went to the bag, understanding flooding through her. She gave Catherine the bag. Helen must have given it to her during one of her visits. It would be just like her. Catherine probably mentioned admiring it. And Helen just ... double quotes. James shook his head. My wife has the biggest heart in the world. She gives away everything. Have you ever misjudged someone completely, only to discover something beautiful underneath? Let us know in the comments how you've learned from moments like these. So, when Catherine passed away, Claire said softly, it went to the estate sale with her other belongings, and Helen's been heartbroken thinking she'd lost it forever. James finished, when really, it was exactly where she meant for it to be, helping someone who needed it. The silence between them stretched long enough for Claire to hear her own heartbeat. James sat with his head in his hands, and she could see his shoulders shaking slightly. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. I owe you the most profound apology, he said. Not just for tonight, but for everything I assumed about you, about your life, your circumstances, your character. Claire felt something unexpected. Not triumph, but sadness for this man who'd been so quick to judge. Everyone makes mistakes. No, this wasn't a mistake. This was cruelty. James's voice was firm now, as if he was being honest with himself for the first time in a long while. I saw someone I thought was beneath me, and I used that as an excuse to be awful. That says nothing about you and everything about who I've become. He pulled out his phone and, after a moment's hesitation, made a call. Claire watched as his expression softened completely. Helen, it's me. I found your bag. No, listen, sweetheart. I found it, and I found something else too. His voice broke slightly. I found out what happened to the bag you gave Catherine. Claire could hear a woman's voice on the other end, excited and tearful. James explained the situation, his eyes never leaving Claire's face. When he finished, he held out the phone. She wants to talk to you, he said. Claire accepted the phone hesitantly. Hello. Oh, honey, came a warm voice through the speaker. I'm Helen Thornfield. James told me what happened tonight, and I'm so sorry for how he treated you. But I'm also so grateful that Catherine's gift found someone who needed it. Mrs. Thornfield, I had no idea. Please, call me Helen. And please, keep the bag. Catherine would be so happy knowing it's helping someone who works as hard as you do. She always said that beautiful things should go to beautiful people. And from what James has told me about how you handled tonight, you're exactly the kind of person she meant. Claire felt tears spilling over. That's incredibly generous, but I couldn't. You absolutely can and will, Helen said firmly. But I have one condition. I want to meet you properly. Would you have coffee with me this weekend? I'd love to tell you more about Catherine, and about why this bag ending up with you feels like exactly the kind of miracle she used to believe in. When Claire handed the phone back to James, he spoke quietly with his wife for a few more minutes. After he hung up, he sat silently for a moment, then pulled out his wallet. I know this doesn't fix what I did, he said, placing several $100 bills on the table. But I want you to know that I see you differently now. I see you as you actually are, someone with dignity, kindness, and grace that I clearly lack. If you've been enjoying this story and want to see how kindness can transform even the most difficult situations, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales like this one. The question is, James continued, whether someone like me can learn to be better, whether it's possible to change when you realize you've become someone you don't recognize anymore. Claire looked at this man, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected. She saw hope. 3 months later, Claire stood in the same corner of Meadowbrook Fine Dining, but everything had changed. She still carried the navy leather bag, though now it held more than her work essentials. It held memories, connections, and a friendship that had bloomed from the most unexpected circumstances. Helen had become a regular part of her life, meeting for coffee every Saturday morning to share stories about Catherine and to plan their weekly visits to the hospice center. What had started as Helen's solo volunteer work had become something they did together, bringing books, flowers, and hope to people who needed both. James had transformed too, though his journey had been more complicated. That night at the restaurant had cracked something open in him, forced him to confront the man he'd become. He'd started seeing a therapist, working through years of privilege and prejudice that had hardened his heart. More importantly, he'd begun volunteering alongside Helen and Claire, learning that true strength came from lifting others up, not tearing them down. You know what Catherine used to say. Helen had told Claire during one of their coffee dates. She said that sometimes God disguises angels as ordinary people, and you never know when you're going to meet one. I think she was talking about nights like the one you and James had. Tonight, as Claire finished her shift, she noticed a familiar figure waiting by the hostess station. James stood there with a small wrapped package, his posture humble and patient, so different from the arrogant man who'd sat at table 12. "I wanted to give you this before you left," he said, offering her the package. Helen helped me pick it out, but the idea was mine. Inside the wrapping was a small leather journal, elegant and simple. On the first page, in careful handwriting, was an inscription, "For Claire, who taught us that dignity isn't about what you carry, but how you carry yourself. With gratitude and friendship, James and Helen." Helen thought you might like to write, James explained, about your experiences, your dreams, maybe even about that night that changed all of us. She thinks you have stories worth telling. Claire ran her fingers over the smooth leather cover, thinking about how much had shifted since that terrible, wonderful evening. "Thank you, both of you." "No," James said firmly. "Thank you. You could have had me fired, could have made a scene, could have done any number of things that night. Instead, you showed me grace when I deserved nothing of the kind. You gave me a chance to become someone better." As Claire walked to her car that night, she thought about Catherine Peterson, a young woman she'd never met, but whose kindness had somehow reached across death to connect 3 strangers. The bag still hung from her shoulder, but now it carried more than her belongings. It carried the weight of unexpected friendships, second chances, and the beautiful truth that people could change when they encountered real grace. Sometimes the most profound gifts come disguised as our worst moments. Sometimes cruelty cracks us open just enough to let the light in. If this story moved you, please remember to like, share your thoughts in the comments about times when you've seen someone transform through kindness, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the goodness that exists in unexpected places. Thank you for joining us on this journey of redemption and hope.